A very warm welcome, dear students. If you're watching this, then you have taken the first step towards taking on the toughest exam in the world, which is UPSC. In order for you to be successful, well, there are many factors, but primarily you need dedication, sacrifice, hard work, and unwavering faith, not just in God, but oneself as well. However, it's my duty to give you a fair warning before you start. It's not going to be easy. You will be tested mentally, physically, and emotionally, but I'm sure that you all have what it takes to make it. But you have to make the right choice. Welcome once again, and I'm your teacher, Kamlapriya IRAS, for this particular course, and it's my promise that you will get the right exposure, right content, and right guidance for anthropology from Byju's. So, the UPSC optional subject list contains 48 subjects in total, one of which is anthropology. The UPSC anthropology syllabus for the CSE exam focuses on the candidate's ability to understand the subject as a science and apply the knowledge to problems faced by people. And the topics included in this particular subject are related to human evolution, social structures, cultural evolution, and development. Today's session will focus entirely on familiarizing you with the subject of anthropology and to go through the entire syllabus in a holistic manner to understand what you can expect to learn in this particular course. So you must all be from different backgrounds. I mean educational backgrounds. You must have done your graduation in civil or mechanical engineering, biotech, or even most of you must be doctors, and also some of you must be having a commerce or arts background. And anthropology as a career is not very common. But as an optional, many prefer it as a subject itself is interesting, and also it is easy to understand. And the questions that come in the papers are quite straightforward, unlike public art, PubAd, or even political science, where you have to actually do some kind of research. So the most important question now is, what is anthropology? See, why to choose anthropology is a completely different question. So if you have started this course, that means you've already chosen anthropology. So I will not reinforce the idea of why to choose anthropology again, simply because we have a lot of ground to cover. So now you have decided that anthropology is your option. This is the perfect course for you. So let us now begin with what is anthropology. If you're not really sure, because anthropology is not a subject that you hear on a daily basis. So let us just see what is anthropology. It is a challenge to make sense of who we are. Where did we come from? Why are we so radically different from some animals and so surprisingly similar to others? Why do our bodies look the way they do? How do we explain so many different beliefs, languages, and customs? Why do we act in certain ways? What makes us tick? While some people answer these questions with biological mechanisms and others with social or spiritual explanations, scholars in the discipline of anthropology address them through a holistic and integrated approach. Therefore, anthropology considers human culture and biology in all times and places as inextricably intertwined, each affecting the other in important ways. For example, in a small maternity clinic in Gujarat, since commercial surrogacy, the practice of paying a woman to carry another's fetus to term was legalized in 2002, wealthy childless parents from all over the globe have traveled to India for this service. Chosen by foreigners because of their healthy, drug-free lifestyle and lower fees, Indian women take on extra biological risk to make it possible for others to reproduce their genes. Now, this is not restricted to only surrogacy. There are global politics and local cultural practices interacting with this purely biological process of birth. Therefore, understanding humanity in all its biological and cultural variety, past and present, is the fundamental contribution of anthropology. So some people study only what is the social aspects of this particular surrogacy. Some people study only this cultural aspect, why only Indian women are chosen. That is the cultural aspect of anthropology, or the cultural aspect of that particular surrogacy. Some political scientists understand what is the global politics involved in surrogacy. But the contribution of anthropology is that it understands the biology, it understands the culture, it understands the politics, and it intertwines and gives us a theory as to why all these are linked. In the era of globalization, this contribution is all the more important. Indeed, the integrative and holistic anthropological perspective has become essential for the human survival itself. Therefore, anthropology is a field of study that studies people with their emphasis on biological and cultural similarities as well as differences among humans. Anthropology studies the typical biological and cultural traits of the human population throughout history and in all regions of the world. Therefore, it is a spatial and temporal study of humans. It has a wider scope, and this is the best subject to understand the species known as Homo sapiens. Therefore, anthropology is the study of humankind everywhere throughout time and produces knowledge about what makes people different from one another and what we all have in common. Now coming to the main branches or subfields or fields of anthropology. We have four important fields of anthropology. One is physical anthropology, sociocultural anthropology, archaeological anthropology, and linguistic anthropology. While physical anthropologists focus on humans as biological organisms, that means tracing their evolutionary development and looking at biological variations, cultural anthropologists focus and investigate the contrasting ways groups of humans think, feel, and behave. And the archaeological anthropologists try to recover information about human cultures, usually from the past, by studying material objects, skeletal remains, and settlements. And meanwhile, the linguistic or linguists study languages, communication systems by which cultures are maintained and passed on to succeeding generations. The practitioners in all four fields are informed by one another's findings and are united by a common anthropological perspective on the human condition. Now, how is anthropology different from other fields? You have political science that also deals with humans or the actions of humans. You have psychology, which deals with human mind. You have economics, which has everything to do with how humans sustain themselves. But how is anthropology different from all these other fields which study humanity? In studying humankind, early anthropologists came to the conclusion that to fully understand the complexities of human thought, feelings, behavior, and biology, it was necessary to study and compare all humans wherever and whenever. More than any feature, this comparative, cross-cultural, long-term perspective distinguishes anthropology from other social sciences. Please remember these three words: comparative, cross-cultural, long-term perspective. See, these three keywords is what distinguishes anthropology from any other social science which studies humanity. Anthropologists are not just scholars who study people, but they are uniquely holistic in their approach, focusing on the interconnections and interdependence of all aspects of human experience. Now coming back to the main branches of anthropology, each of anthropology's fields may take a distinct approach to the study of humans, but all gather and analyze data that are essential to explaining the similarities and differences among humans. Moreover, all of them generate knowledge that has numerous practical applications. Many scholars within each of the four fields practice something known as applied anthropology, which entails using anthropological knowledge and methods to solve practical problems. We have a dedicated chapter 12, as well as entire paper 2, which focuses on applied anthropology and how this anthropological knowledge was used or is used to solve practical problems of people. Now, I will briefly discuss the main branches of anthropology so you have an idea about how we have designed this particular syllabus. We have divided the syllabus according to the main branches so that you have continuity. Because, for example, physical anthropology starts from chapter 1.4 to 1.7 and again from 9.1 to chapter 12. So instead of breaking it, and in between you have again social cultural anthropology, archaeological anthropology. So instead of breaking taken a break of physical anthropology in between, we have made it as a continuous chapters so that it will be easy for you to appreciate what you've learned in the early chapters and apply the same in the later chapters. So the physical anthropology as such will be an entire block. So physical anthropology, which is also known as biological anthropology, focuses on humans as biological organisms. See, more than what we are, the first thing is all of us are biological organisms. We are made of the same flesh, bone, and meat as every other species on this planet. Now, traditionally, biological anthropologists concentrated on human evolution, primatology, human growth and development, human adaptation, human genetics, molecular anthropology, etc. Today, this human genetics or molecular anthropology, which is the anthropological study of genes and genetic relationships, contributes significantly to the contemporary study of human biological diversity. We have so many chapters from 9.1 to almost 9.6 which are specifically dedicated only to human genetics. As experts, and I know that most of you feel that these are the toughest chapters for you, but I've made it, the explanation, I've made it very, very simple so that everybody and anybody can understand what this particular thing is, because these chapters are the foundation of physical anthropology and you cannot miss out on those. And it's quite simple. Once you understand the explanation, it is quite simple. As experts in anatomy of human bones and tissues, physical anthropologists lend their knowledge about body to applied areas such as anatomy laboratories, public health, and criminal investigation. We will take one small example. Now, studying the anatomy, and you can ask that why do we study primatology? What is primatology? It is the study of primates. Studying the anatomy and behavior of other primates helps us understand what we share with our closest living relatives and what makes humans unique. Everybody says that we have descended from the monkey or from the chimpanzee or the gorilla, but what is the truth? Therefore, primatology, or the study of living and fossil primates, is a vital part of physical anthropology. Primates include the Asian and African apes, as well as monkeys, lemurs, lorises, and tarsiers. And biologically, humans are members of the ape family. It has been proven now, so we cannot go back on that. And apes are the large-bodied, broad-shouldered primates with no tail, and we have descended from the apes. Detailed study of ape behavior in the wild indicate that sharing of learned behavior is a significant part of their social life, and this is how we even got it. Increasingly, primatologists designate the shared learned behavior of non-human apes as culture. For example, even apes use tools and communication systems as they had some form of rudimentary language. Now, primate studies offer the scientifically grounded perspectives on behavior of our ancestors, as well as great appreciation and respect for the abilities of our closest living relatives to understand how we acquired the kind of behavior that we display now. If the tool used was there in our ancestors, that is the apes, we also use tools now, but we made it better. We use rockets now. But why are we different from apes? So primatology primarily focuses on these kind of similarities and what made humans who they are. Now, coming to sociocultural anthropology, which is the next primary branch of anthropology. It is also known as cultural anthropology. It is the most interesting, and by the time you actually study sociocultural anthropology in its entirety, you will have an entirely different perspective of this entire world. That I can guarantee you. The cultural practices that we have and the cultural practices that others have, there is so much variation and so much color in that. So it is very important for you to understand sociocultural anthropology. It is nothing but the study of patterns of human behavior, thoughts, and feelings. It focuses on humans as culture-producing and culture-reproducing creatures. Therefore, in order to understand the work of cultural anthropology, one must clarify what do we mean by culture. So culture is nothing but a society's shared and socially transmitted ideas, values, and perceptions which are used to make sense of experience and generate behavior and are reflected in this behavior. And do we learn culture from birth? As soon as we are born, do we know how to eat in a proper manner? That we have to eat only that, maintaining the proper dinner etiquette? No, we are taught this. Therefore, these standards are socially learned rather than acquired through biological inheritance. And sociocultural anthropology includes in itself subfields like economic anthropology, religion, culture, the study of culture as such, and etc. You don't have to note down everything I mentioned because this is an introductory class. I want you to focus on the main parts of anthropology. Everything that I say today, be it archaeology, the definition of archaeology or definition of culture, everything will be repeated in subsequent classes. So please just focus on understanding anthropology as a whole. This is just an introductory class. From the next class, whenever I start a particular topic, then every word I say would be important. Then coming to the third branch, that is archaeology. Now, archaeology is the branch of anthropology that studies human cultures through the recovery and analysis of material remains and environmental data. How do we know that in the ancient past, how do we know that man had or humans had this kind of food? Humans live in this kind of settlements. Therefore, material products including tools, pottery, hearth, and enclosures that remain as traces of cultural practices in the past, as well as human, plant, and marine remains. All of these reflect specific human ideas and behavior in the past. For example, restricted concentrations of charcoal or bone fragments, charred plant remains located near pieces of fire-cracked rock, pottery, and other tools suitable for food preparation indicate cooking and food processing. Such remains can even reveal much about the people's diet and subsistence pattern in those days. Therefore, these material remains help archaeologists reconstruct the biological or biocultural context of past human life ways. Archaeologists or archaeological anthropologists organize this material and use it to explain cultural variability and culture change through time. Now, coming to the fourth and final branch, which is linguistic anthropology. What would you say is the most distinctive feature of human species? What makes us very, very different from animals? Though, the first thing that comes to mind is the way we communicate, the way we have a language. Would you agree that this is the most distinctive feature of human species? Although the sounds and gestures made by some other animals, especially apes, may serve functions comparable to those of human language, no other animal has developed a system of symbolic communication as complex as that of humans. Language allows people to preserve and transmit countless details of their culture from generation to generation. The branch of anthropology that studies human languages is called as linguistic anthropology. It also emphasizes on documentation of languages of cultures under ethnographic study, particularly those whose futures seem very, very precarious. For example, the Native American languages is so different from the Indo-European languages, and this gives an idea of the linguistic diversity by looking at the world. For example, the observation that the language of Hopi Indians of the American Southwest had no words for past, present, and future led the early proponents of linguistic relativity to suggest that Hopi people had a different conception of time. Similarly, the observation that English-speaking North Americans use a number of slang words such as dough, dust, loot, bucks, change, paper, cake to refer to money could be a product of linguistic relativity. So all these interesting things. So what does this say? That means you're using so many different words. It's like dough, dust, loot, green, change, paper, cake, bread. All these words are used to refer to just one word, that is money. So that means if The importance of money within North American culture is evident in the association between money and time, and the phrases, also the phrases that they use. For example, time is money and spend some time. So these phrases have come from North American culture. So just by understanding the language, you can understand what that culture deems as important. Therefore, linguistic anthropology is also quite important. And one more interesting example I will give you why language and complex ideas and practices integral to cultural survival can be reflected in language. For example, among the Noor, you'll study a lot of this in social cultural anthropology, such case studies. Among the Noor, a nomadic group that travels with grazing animals throughout southern Sudan, a baby born with visible deformity is not considered as a human baby. It is called as a baby hippopotamus. This name allows for the safe return of the hippopotamus to the river where it belongs. Such infants, they know, would not be able to survive in the society, and so linguistic practice is compatible with the compassionate choice that the Neors have to make. So if you don't consider the baby as a baby, it is easy for them to let go of this baby who will not survive in the future. And what does this tell about their culture? It tells about how compassionate or how they deal with grief and loss. So now we have a fair idea about all the main branches of anthropology. Coming to the pattern of paper, this is probably the most important part, so please pay attention, because no matter how much you study all the chapters, this is where in the end you have to put everything, all your knowledge into practice. And each paper that you choose, each question that you choose also makes a huge difference. I will explain that now. Now, anthropology optional subject has two papers, paper 1 and paper 2 in UPSC mains. Each paper, that is paper 1, is of 250 marks, and paper 2 is of 250 marks. Therefore, total is of 500 marks weightage in your UPSC exam. And anthropology optional in UPSC exam, it has very crisp syllabus and very easy to understand. And though it takes time to complete the entire syllabus, but still it is a popular choice among a lot of people because the scoring is quite good. And as well, if you put all the facts across, then you can score well. And one more important thing is that the questions are very straightforward in anthropology. So the pattern of paper is such that each paper, a candidate has 8 questions, and each paper divided into 2 sections. So in paper 1, for example, if you take paper 1, you have section 1 and section 2. You have 8 questions divided in 2 sections. You have 4 questions here and you have 4 questions here. A candidate must attempt any 5 questions. Any 5 questions. Any question, question number 1 and 5 are compulsory. Question number 1 and 5 are compulsory. And question number 1 usually has many short notes. Even question number 5 usually has short notes for 10 marks each. So those are compulsory. And out of the remaining, any 3 have to be attempted, choosing at least 1 question from each section. That means as 1 and 5. So you have to answer 5 in total. 1 and 5 already you have to answer. So you're left with any 3 questions. But all these 3 questions you can't take from section 1, or all these 3 questions you can't take from section 2. You have to choose 3 questions from both section 1 and section 2, at least 1 question from each section. Okay, that is how it has to be done. See, remember this particular pattern because people have made mistakes in choosing these questions. Some people have forgotten that they have to choose at least 1 question from each section and have lost entire 20 marks in the paper. Not just 20, that comes up to almost 40 marks because it is 20, 15 is divided into each question divided into 20 subsections of 20, 15 and 10. So almost 45 marks they've lost even without attempting, even after writing all the questions, but they have forgotten to choose at least 1 question from each section. So please be very, 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 very careful in this. And from your mock stage itself, you start practicing this. Okay. So now that the pattern of paper is clear, so we will move on to, in that pattern, what you can expect. Now question number 1 and 5, both in paper 1 and paper 2, consist of 5 short notes each, worth 10 marks per question. Very, very important. In this short notes itself, you can score quite high marks. Remaining questions contain 3 parts each, and all 3 parts should be answered if you choose a question. Okay. And word limiting questions, wherever specified, should be adhered to. For example, if it says a 10 marker should only be 150 words, and 15 marker, if mentioned, it should be of 250 words, and 20 markers should be of 300 words. I'll tell you why. One more reason why word limit is very important. If you don't have that word limit and you go on writing, you will trust me, you will not have enough time to complete the paper. If you want to complete the paper, please strictly restrict yourself to this word limit. That means that when you have a 10 marker, you have to write 150 words. Please make sure that you finish it in 5 minutes at any cost. Okay, and then you have a 15 marker, which is of 250 words. On this, you can spend 10 minutes, and 10 minutes only. Then coming to 300 words. So coming to 20 marker, which is of 300 words. Here you can spend 15 minutes and 15 minutes only. This is the only way you finish the paper. Otherwise, you will struggle and unnecessarily you will lose out on marks. So make sure that while you practice, when you do your practice questions or when you're attending any mock, make sure that you practice this particular time limits.